Welcome to News and Views. My name is Danae Jones and we're out on the road today travelling, and we're here in Mareeba at the Savannah Lifestyle Resort. Savannah Lifestyle Resort is perfectly situated in Mareeba, just under an hour west of Cairns on the Tablelands in far north Queensland. Savannah is the only lifestyle resort north of Bundaberg that continues to raise the benchmark for both the over 50s and the manufactured parks and retirement villages. We have a treat for you this week as we sit down with one of the most loved TV journalists and authors in our country, Ray Martin. Ray Martin is a 5-time Gold Logie winner and is most known for his TV show Midday, which graced our lounge rooms for many years, and his work on 60 Minutes and many other documentaries and current affair programs. He is one journalist some of the world's biggest names have agreed to be interviewed by. He was awarded an Order of Australia in 2010 for his work within community, the media industry, and the many and varied charities he has been patron of. He even had a collection of postage stamps created in his honour. So welcome to News and Views, Ray.
Thank you, nice to be here.
Yeah, you too. It's such a pleasure. I've sat from afar and just adored you in the chair for all of your journalistic career.
Checks in the mail.
Yeah.
So
it's great to sit down with you today, and welcome to far north Queensland.
Thank you. No, I used to come here often. I've been to Mareeba quite a lot of times, but I used to come to Cairns every year with my family early on. We'd bring the kids up and in the winter time in Sydney and come up to various parts of the north coast around Cairns here. So we were almost familiar figures every June.
Well, there you go. Well, it's very cold down south, so I don't blame you for coming up here for the winter.
No, it's a great place. It's a lovely place.
Yeah, and so Savannah Resort. Can you explain to us why you're here today in Mareeba?
Well, I was invited to come up here and speak to by the organisers of Savannah, and I'd seen some some of their PR presentations about it. It looked like an interesting sort of project, and also they tend to be, my Midday show audience. They were people who used to love Midday, and so it was easy talking to them about Midday stories. So it's plus the fact I take a lot of photographs, and I like to zip up to the various parts of Australia and take photographs. So plus.
And they seemed to like you. When you walked in the room, you had quite the welcome.
It's always very nice. It's if my wife welcomed me that much and that positively, I'd feel good. But, no, but it's I guess Midday, like as you were saying about your grandma. We were there every day, 5 days a week at 12 o'clock. Rain, hail or shine, we were there, and we made them laugh and made them cry and made them think occasionally. But entertain them. And I think it was, in many cases, men and women who were at home alone, even shift workers and even kids at home from university and things like this, don't get that sort of regular company that we were. And so we were there, as I say, dependably, far more than, your son-in-law or your son who only sees you once a month or something. And so in that sense, we were very much part of the landscape.
So true. When you say company, that's really sort of what you were, weren't you? Being the face of Midday and all the other TV programs that you've done throughout your career.
We had regulars, the regular John Michael Housens and Dr. Wright and all these other people had come. We introduced some new characters to the show. Plus there was a lot of music and a range of music and a comic every day. And we brought everyone who came to Australia who was interesting, we talked to. So it was a nice little cocktail of television that people could seriously love. I loved working on it, and so I only hope that people loved it at home.
And so today, what are the types of things that take up your day
I'm still working almost full bore. I did 90 airline trips last year and 98 the year before, mostly in Australia, but I do about this year I've been to Bangladesh and I've been to Scandinavia and I've been to Hobart and Darwin a couple of times, and I've been up here and I was already this year. So I'm doing probably at least one a week, usually 2 a week, and I'm doing a fair bit of SBS stuff. I did a piece in Bangladesh last month for 7:30 report. I'm still doing stuff for 60 Minutes. I just pick and choose what I want to do. When you reach my old age, you can just pretty much do what you want to or say no. And it's nice to say no when you're a journalist, to be able to say no rather than have to do things. So that's a luxury that I can afford now.
Great. And so you have a number of passions, things that are very close to your heart, Indigenous rights being one of them.
Yep.
And obviously domestic violence, which is something very close to your heart. Are they things that they're the stories that you like to cover now, or?
Yeah, I mean, domestic violence, I did a documentary for Prime last year on that, and it was one of those that I just think it's a shameful. It's the most common crime in Australia, and we're a fairly law-abiding country, apart from things like mainly men bashing women mainly, and it's got to stop. At some stage, you've got to say no, that's unacceptable under any circumstances. And my mother was a victim of it. We weren't as kids. My father was very passive with us, but if he had too much to drink, he occasionally started to get violent with mum, and which is why they split. But it's just a reality for lots of families, and it shouldn't be. And we simply should, as the police departments are now doing at last, waking up, and they tend to say no, it's unacceptable. There's no second chance on these things. That if you actually hit women and children, well then we're going to lock you up. And that's what we should do. We should do that. So it's one of those things that I just think it's a no-brainer. It's if men don't get the message, we've got to make sure they get the message. But otherwise, I tend to do things that I take a lot of photographs. I become quite obsessive photographer. So I tend to do stories. Even the 7:30 report in Bangladesh, that was done with probably 20 or 30 of my photographs. We ran in that as well. So I don't hide the fact. I used to be a closet photographer, and now I've come out of the closet, so to speak, and I acknowledge, I just let people know that I take a camera with me everywhere. There's one in the car here, and I take it everywhere and take photographs.
I could have employed you today for the Savannah launch.
I could have easily. I don't do what these guys do. I don't do movie filming. I think that's a special, different side of the brain. But I take still photographs, and I do it, obsessively, compulsively. If I don't do it, for a couple of days, I really have to go and take photos of the flowers in the garden or something in the garden. I have these withdrawal symptoms that I need to satisfy.
The cameramen probably understand exactly where you're coming from.
Except they do it as a job, you see. I do it as a hobby and as pleasure, and so I'm sure they don't take the camera with them everywhere they go, whereas I do.
Yeah. Now, you were saying to the audience about all of the people that you've interviewed throughout your career. I mean, it's extraordinary, the people that you've interviewed. And I know you rattled off so many different names, but what was your most memorable or enjoyable interview?
Oh wow, I mean, dozens and dozens and dozens of those that were generally not just famous people, but ordinary people who do extraordinary things. I'm a cricket nut, so Don Bradman was, to get the interview with Don Bradman was probably, I felt like I'd died and gone to heaven. I felt like I was a kid in a toy shop, all those cliches. He had never done an interview about his early life and his marriage and his love affair with Jessie, and what he thought of modern day cricketers and all those sorts of things, and he agreed to do it. And he was 87 and lived till he was about mid-90s, and so that was, I just thought it was unbelievable to sort of sit there and have him stand up and play a cover drive or talk about things that I'd just read about as a kid and as a cricket nut. But I've got a holy trinity. My holy trinity of 10,000 plus interviews is Don Bradman, David Attenborough, whom I've done 30 shows with in recent years, who was just impeccable. He's just a most astonishingly generous, funny, warm, witty listener. He actually listens as well, which is unusual for a star like that. And the third one was Fred Hollows, who became, I was chairman of the Fred Hollows Foundation for 10 years. He sort of dragooned me into chairing his foundation, and he died 23 years ago. And there are 8 million people today who are cataract blind who can now see as a result of Fred's foundation, what Fred does.
Phenomenal.
And it is amazing. I mean, it's hard to think of someone who's had that impact on not just 8 million people, but there are 8 million people who are cataract blind who can now see because of the Hollows Foundation. And then beyond that are all those people, usually girls or women, who have to look after grandma who's blind or grandpa who's blind, etc. And so that takes them out of factor. And when you're blind in the third world, you die more quickly because you're useless from the family's point of view, and even much as they love you, and you can't work in the fields. So it's tens of millions of people who are affected by the blindness that he's fixed. Now I sort of stop and think that's unbelievable that one man could have had, excuse the pun, but the vision to do something like that. So, he's my third. David Attenborough, Sir Donald Bradman and Fred Hollows. And they're very different characters, but incredible men.
Yeah, definitely, and such big names, and there's so many others I know that you've interviewed in that time. You did mention that if you could interview someone, the Queen might be someone that you'd like to interview.
Yeah, no, I think she is my number one choice, but as long as she was free to talk, and she tends to be a fairly independent lady anyway, but I think the protocols are such that that she'd have to keep quiet on things she knows. But if she was able to talk about politicians she's known, and including Australians, etc., and the background to some of the biggest events in the last 60 years, that'd be extraordinary. And I said that first question that I'd always ask would be, "What's in your handbag, ma'am?" Because I can't imagine what she carries in a handbag.
I was thinking stick, but then you said she's got her own makeup artist.
A lady in waiting's there to make sure that a rouge and a lipstick and so on is good, and there's a head, someone to do a hair for her. And not that it needs doing, it tends to be...
It's quite perfect.
That's right, and it tends to be, I think, frozen on, and at that. But anyway, the royals generally, I'm a Republican, and so the royals generally don't appeal to me, but people like the Pope and people like the Queen who've been involved in, sort of serious matters for all their lives, I think would be worth talking to, like the boss of the mafia would be worth talking to.
Definitely, definitely. Now you are covering the latest royal wedding, I believe.
I'm doing it for SBS. They asked me to do it, and they're doing it. I'm not going to London as most of the other networks are. They're based in London. We've got someone there, but so I'm doing it with a studio audience, and also from the point of view of, as I say, I'll be very respectful, and I think everyone loves a good wedding, and the pomp and circumstance of a British wedding, and the Brits do it, and Buckingham Palace does it better than anybody. I've covered a lot of weddings and and funerals and births across there, but so they do it well. It'll be the carriages and the regalia and the rest of the carry-on will be fantastic, and I think we all love that. But I think it's also, for something like SBS, it's a chance to communicate or liaise with all those Australians who aren't Anglo-Irish, who don't have a connection with the royalty and with British traditions. And that's, I think, last figure was about 40% of Australians whose parents didn't speak English as a first language, so they came here as refugees or as migrants. And I wonder, what does it mean to a Vietnamese person, or what does it mean to a Chinese person, the carry-on of a royal wedding, and I think there's a chance. As I say, it's not about to put down the event, because the event is just one of those spectacular occasions, and everyone loves a good wedding. But I think it's a good chance to say, how relevant is this to Australia, and do we care beyond the extravagance of the wedding, and if we do, why, and what's it all about? I mean, there's no question that the two young princes and now with their brides, have almost revitalised the monarchy.
Haven't they?
And it's amazing. I mean, William and Kate turn up in Brisbane in the mall, and 5,000 people suddenly around there screaming and carrying on. Now, I don't understand that. I mean, I understand, why they might do it for a Hollywood star, perhaps. I don't even understand, or a rock star. But for the British royals, that are really important for Britain, but I don't think they're very important for Australia, to be honest. But people do think they are, and therefore why? And is this going to change, or do people who come from China or Vietnam, when they come to Australia, think that that's an important part of who we are or who they are? Maybe they do. So I think SBS can cover this probably with a bit of a sense of humour as well. I think we'll have some comedy as well, and a bit of humour, but again, not a put down. I mean, it's not meant to be a put down. It's meant to be, this is an event. And you'd cover an event if it wasn't a royal wedding. You'd cover it from all angles, and so I think it's we've got quite a good lively panel and quite a good number of experts, and we'll have an audience, and we'll see what happens.
I look forward to watching.
Thanks.
Bringing it back to a local level and talking about, a good wedding, a good funeral. Well, there's never a good funeral, but we always enjoy a good event, including the births.
Well, some funerals are good. Some wakes are good, and some people are, have had a good innings. and even the people who love them dearly think, well,
Yes.
it's probably time to go.
And it's more of a celebration of life then.
Yeah, it is. And
Well,
that can be
today we
fun.
celebrated a life with the birth of the little baby in the hospital.
Yeah, that was great, wasn't it?
So can you explain to us what actually happened at the hospital today? Savannah Resort donated some money, which is obviously going to change things for the paediatric unit.
Yeah, they donated almost $15,500 that bought 4 chairs stroke beds, leather beds for the hospital. So they're for families of patients, not just children, but adults as well, in 2 of them paediatrics we saw today. And they, instead of the family having to find a motel in town and pay for that with all the expenses, especially if they've come from regional Queensland, they can now stay alongside their loved one, especially alongside a child or a baby who's ill, and they can be close and cuddle the baby and care for the baby or care for the child when they're distressed. So that's all part of medicine. It's part of hospitalisation, and we tended to, we've always targeted the child or the baby, which we should, and we want to save the lives. But part of that whole experience is making it a little more comfortable for parents who are as distressed as the child, because nothing distresses more than a sick baby, and so in that sense we need to be, and the hospital is it's a very good hospital. Governments can't buy everything for hospitals. Yeah. I'm not sure the bill is in Queensland, but I know in New South Wales it's $23 billion a year. $23 billion a year for health.
Huge.
Now, governments of any persuasion can't pay much more than that. So we can, as taxpayers and as public citizens, and in this case it was a company or Savannah who decided to give something to the hospital. Now, that just makes a difference. Often you can buy equipment that saves lives. In this case, it's almost as important in giving some comfort to a family in stress. And the family may well lose that baby or may well lose that person. And so it's not just a matter of, it is life and death, and it's not just a matter of looking after somebody who happens to have a sick child. It could well be, the last couple of weeks of the person's life. And therefore, you need to be in shape to cope with that and also to ease the person through it, etc. So all these reasons. And so I think that the value is that we have, as in Mareeba, we have in the Australian hospital systems fantastic people. The nurses and the doctors and the staff and so on are unquestionably fantastic. Yep. In my experience, and I've had a lot to do with them. But they're sometimes fighting with their arm tied behind their back. Sometimes they don't have, a simple piece of equipment that would save a baby's life, and they just don't. I mean, I know there's something called an EZIO, which is a drill that you put into toddlers' bones to stabilise them when they're in trouble. When you're trying to find a vein, and it doesn't hurt, but they cost about $1,800. Now we've had doctors and nurses come to us at the Humpty Dumpty Foundation, where I'm a patron, and said, look, we've just lost a toddler because we didn't have one of these pieces of equipment. And so the Humpty Dumpty Foundation has bought about 400 of those drills for hospitals around Australia, including Mareeba. And so it is life-saving. It is something that is the difference between life and death in a hospital. And it's not because, as I say, because governments are slack. And it's not because the doctors and the nurses and the specialists are slack. They're anything but that. It's because they don't have the equipment. So if we can help as a personal citizen, I think rather than, maybe give money to, to some stray charity, which may be terrific, but nevertheless, here we know it makes a difference. And if you can help your local hospital, you don't know when you're going to use it next, or someone you love is going to use it next, etc. So I just think that what the Savannah did was very generous and fantastic, but I think we all should take note of that and follow their example and try and
take a leap.
Yeah, and try and do, give money to, if you've got a bit of spare cash for something, and we all have. I want to talk about $15,500, which is what Savannah gave, which is fantastically generous. But $100 here and $1,000 there can make a huge difference.
And so they're making differences to the lives of the elderly too here at the resort, aren't they? I mean, anyone aged 55 plus really can come here for a lifestyle resort. It's not an old age home, I've been reminded. It's definitely not an old age home.
No, it's not that. In fact, I said today that I was here with Warren Mundine, who's in his 60s, and he was. I said, "Well, this is a good place we could retire to."
I could live there. They need babysitters though, but
but he said that there's far too many activities here for him. He was exhausted just looking at the activities. So, as you say, it's not retirement, and it is a chance to simply be with people who are like-minded in some ways, given our age. And but beyond that is simply just use this as almost a starting point, a bouncing off point for other things you want to do in your life.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure sitting down with you and having a chat. I could sit and talk to you all day. Your career has just been phenomenal.
Thank you.
So thank you for coming to Mareeba and Far North Queensland and spending some time with us here today, and obviously launching the new clubhouse at Savannah Resort.
It's not a bad shed, is it?
Not bad at all.
As sheds go, it's fantastic. No, it's fantastic. And good people. I mean, the people came up and were nice and kind and generous in their comments, but as well as that, they're obviously enjoying the
You had quite a queue.
Well, no one's actually making them stay here. I think they're here because they like it.
Yeah, but you had quite a queue for photos.
Oh, that's nice.
Thanks, Ray. So there you have it, folks. Interview with Ray Martin here in Far North Queensland today. We're up at the Savannah Lifestyle Resort in Mareeba. That's all we have for you this week. We'll see you next week.